Good morning. How's everyone? Yeah? Let me know when you're ready. Everyone? Very good. Well, the Palaszczuk government continues to roll out initiatives directed at improving housing supply right across Queensland. You'll recall that last year we held a housing roundtable and a housing summit, and there have been a range of initiatives directed at each level of the market to increase supply. And today we're announcing a new and expanded housing supply expert panel. Last year we expanded the remit of the housing supply expert panel from southeast Queensland to all of Queensland, and now we are refreshing the membership and expanding the membership of the panel to increase the skills and expertise available to us in providing advice to us. So the new panel, we've ensured we have expertise in property development, real estate, town planning, demographics, economics and Indigenous housing. I want to thank the 12 members of the new expanded housing supply expert panel, as well as the 59 people who applied to be part of the panel, and we certainly appreciate their support as well. The panel will provide us with ongoing advice about market activity, about stock in the private sector, in social and affordable housing, as well as in public housing. They'll ensure that the data we are providing to the market provides them the intelligence that they need to continue to develop supply, including the long-term supply development monitoring program. I want to thank the 9 outgoing members of the housing supply expert panel, and we have here with us today Guy Gibson, one of the members of the panel, who's able to talk about what the panel can provide to industry to support them. Secondly, today we're also calling on Queenslanders to help us name some new suburbs, to have their say in the names of Queensland's newest suburbs. Our growth area team has been working to unlock homes in the Caboolture West area, which will one day be a city housing 70,000 people. It will deliver homes to Queenslanders for the next 40 years, 30,000 homes, and create in the process 17,000 jobs. It's being facilitated by tens of millions of dollars of loans forwarded by the Palaszczuk government to unlock that supply for things like utilities. We are structure planning that entire city to ensure that everyone has clarity about where the roads and the schools and the transport and the hubs and the utilities of the future will be, so that the community can have confidence that the infrastructure needed to support that many people will be there at the time that it is needed, and so that industry can develop those suburbs. At the moment, we've been calling that part of Caboolture West NDP1. We think that's got a certain ring to it, but that we can probably do better for the suburbs that will house the Queensland families of the future. And so we've proposed 5 new names for the first 5 new suburbs. They are based on the wildlife, plants and rocks of Caboolture West. The 5 proposed names are Warraba, which is the Cubby name for word for burn, Lilywood, Wagtail Grove, Greenstone and Corimbia. Queenslanders have until the 3rd of February to tell us what they think of those new names for our newest suburbs. Can I turn to Guy Gibson on the Housing Supply Expert Panel?
Thanks, Deputy Premier. The Housing Supply Expert Panel has a really important role in advising government on strategies and policies to promote the availability and affordability of housing. It's now widely recognised that we've got a severe shortage of housing in not just southeast Queensland but across the state, and we need to identify ways that we can promote more diversity of housing, more adequate supplies of housing to meet demand, particularly as it grows with increasing interstate migration, and improve affordability of housing. So the expert panel will be providing advice to government about ways that can be done through local planning schemes, through state policy and through other interventions.
Very good. Christopher.
What's your number one priority? Is it unlocking existing accommodation?
Well, the problems that we've got in the housing system are quite widespread. So in addition to providing more available land for new family housing in new suburbs, like Caboolture West will provide, we also need to provide to identify ways of unlocking the existing potential that we've got in established urban areas. The regional plan obviously has targets to promote that form of development, infill and consolidation, but the rate at which that happens is determined by a lot of other factors. There are construction economics at play, there is consumer preference that leads people to want family housing in new suburbs, and you know, the economics of providing new rental accommodation in particular are difficult at the moment. So we need to provide, to identify ways that we can increase the supply of housing across the whole housing spectrum, and that includes social housing, more affordable forms of accommodation for people in severe need of accommodation, address homelessness, and then provide more available housing in greenfield areas, as well as unlocking the potential that we do have in established urban areas.
That's what I'm getting at. It takes so long to build houses. Is there anything we can do that's going to be quicker than that?
Well, some of the policies that have already been introduced to promote the take-up of accessory dwellings, for instance, in established urban areas is a very useful technique, because that form of accommodation, the accessory dwellings attached to existing housing, can be constructed by the cottage building industry, so it's the most affordable accommodation that can be built. It's very low scale, low key, so it doesn't create the sort of community opposition in terms of infill that higher density forms of development can often create. So it's a very gentle form of infill, gentle urbanism as it's becoming known across the country, or missing middle. So that's a policy which has immediate effect, which has the potential to unlock quite a lot of more affordable housing.
Is that the granny flats policy?
Yes, accessory. Well, you might be surprised. Policies like this were introduced in New South Wales, in the Sydney metro area, back in the early 80s. They were introduced in the ACT, also in the early 80s, and there was enormous take-up, because it's a very affordable form of accommodation that can be constructed by the cottage building industry. It meets a lot of family needs, so even though, you know, historically they've been known as granny flats, you know, there are a lot of other situations. We've got more multi-generational living now, so there's a lot of different cultures that want to live in multi-generational accommodation, and these sort of larger accessory units, subsidiary dwellings, granny flats, whatever you like to call them, do create an opportunity for lots of different sorts of demographics who want that accommodation.
How much of it is going to be a mindset change? We have to get used to these different types of accommodation. Do you think we're still stuck in the 50 where?
Well, I don't think it's that so much as the need to make sure that we're providing a diverse range of accommodation to suit a diversity of preferences. There are always going to be young family households who want to buy a family home in a new suburb, and we have to accommodate that demand. And that is about 50% of housing demand across the country, typically. But there are many other household types that are looking to different sorts of accommodation. So I think the real issue is we need to make sure that we don't have this dichotomy between large family homes on the one hand on a single block of land, and an apartment in a high-rise on the other. We need to provide all of the alternatives in between to provide for as many different household types as we can, and lifestyle preferences and capacity to pay. Affordability is going to be a key issue going forward.
Given those lists of 50% of the market, you say, for housing managers, are we falling behind, or how much more do we have to have? How much better do we have to get about?
Well, I think across the country, the research shows that we need to provide more land, more greenfield land to meet that demand. South East Queensland's got particularly pressing needs because of the likely increase in interstate migration that we will be experiencing, and also the increased focus on South East Queensland in the lead up to the 2032 Olympics and Paralympics.
Deputy Premier, where are some of those short-term measures, like where are we up to with group accommodation, and where are we up to with the purchasing of those blocks of land from the
I understand in the case of Griffith University, there is now construction work underway to convert that accommodation into a suitable form that can then be operated by the NGO sector to provide as social housing. The audit of available land, which includes the land that was proposed by the Catholic Church. That work is underway. There has been substantial amounts of land identified by state government agencies, by local government, and by NGOs like the Catholic Church and Griffith University. So that assessment process is currently underway by State Development.
When will that be finished?
Oh, it'll be an ongoing process. So as it's finished for a particular piece of land, then work can get underway there, but it will take some time. There's a lot of properties under consideration.
When will we see the first one?
Early in the new year. Anything else on housing? We might just let Guy. Thank you very much for your time. You're welcome to. Well, before I address that question, Jack, this is my first chance to speak since the awful murder of Emma Lavelle. Can I just say, I don't have the words to express how tragic that death is, how awful that is. Like everyone who lives in the North Lakes community, I woke to that horrible news, and I know her family are grieving. The whole community there is grieving. The police assure me that they will leave no stone unturned in ensuring that the most thorough investigation possible is undertaken and all appropriate actions are undertaken, as well as providing all of the support to the Lavelle family that we can. I think all of our hearts are breaking for them and what they are experiencing. It's just awful. To your question, Jack, I think the Premier was very clear yesterday when she said that the courts were not meeting the community's expectation in terms of allowing offenders onto bail and out of the custodial system to commit further crimes, and that's why a key element of the package of reforms that were announced yesterday was requiring that the courts consider previous breaches of bail in determining sentencing and bail decisions. That's a very clear signal to the courts that we're not just saying that they can consider that, as the law has previously said. We will now say that they must consider that, and I think that's a very important signal of the community's expectations on how the courts will make those considerations.
I think that seems like it's sort of passing the buck though, because it always seems as though it takes a tragedy like this to get some change. We saw Jack Beasley, we saw Kate Ledbetter, and now we're seeing this, and we're seeing multiple crimes occurring, particularly with those youth gangs. But unless there's a major tragic outcome, it seems as though it's fallen on deaf ears, the charges there.
We've had multiple waves now of legislative reform and other reform to address these kinds of awful crimes. We continue to say to our agencies that if there is more that we can and should do to help them to address these crimes, then we will consider them and we will do them. And that is ongoing work. It has been ongoing work and it will continue. And what you saw yesterday was the culmination of that work, of months of working with agencies to determine what more we can and should do, and another very comprehensive package that will take time and effort to implement and work through the detail of, but we are very committed to doing that work.
So you say that those reforms were in the works for months.
Well, this is a
Decision made yesterday to announce them, given what happened in North Lakes.
As I say, this is a continual process. We are in an ongoing way saying to our agencies, justice, the courts, the police, youth justice, to bring forward to us the things that they think in their advice we can do that will help, and we will consider them in an ongoing way, and that's what you've seen here. A number of initiatives that have been under consideration, reaching the point where we've been able to announce them to the Queensland community, to assure the Queensland community that we are doing everything we are advised to do by the police to give them the tools that they need to fight crime.
Why would Cabinet consulted on these? Why would Cabinet consulted on these topics new ideas before they were announced?
I'm not going to get into the detail of how those matters were deliberated on within Cabinet, Jack, but I can assure you that they have been the result of a very thorough internal process of seeking proposals from agencies about what more we can and should do, consideration of how we can and should implement those ideas, and now we'll go about putting this next package, this next wave of reforms into action.
So just to be clear, it's purely coincidental that these reforms seem to be announced
Clearly, there was a call from the community to see more action this week. What I'm saying is that that package had been under consideration, had been being worked on for some time, and there was an opportunity for us to outline those new actions this week in the context of very high community interest.
So what was the plan?
maximum sentences don't seem to have any impact because the stats show that rarely do magistrates get anywhere near maximum sentences. So was there any consideration given to increasing the minimum sentences for the crime?
So the advice to us continued to be that the best way to signal to the courts how seriously the government and the community sees those offences involving motor vehicles, offences happening at night, offences involving violence, offences involving weapons, that the best way to signal to the judiciary how seriously we saw those offences was to increase the maximum penalty. The advice continued to be that government cannot, without knowing all of the facts of each individual case, take into account the matters that courts should in determining actual sentences. However, what we have done is to say to the magistrates and to the judiciary that the community sees these offences, offences involving violence, offences invading homes, offences involving motor vehicles as serious crimes that should be punished with serious penalties, including these new higher maximum penalties.
Do you think these kids really care if they get 7 or 10 years?
I think the signal that we send to the courts about how important the community thinks it is that these offenders receive serious custodial time is what we can do, what we need to do, what we should do, the right thing to do, and what we will do.
So it's a message also increasing that maximum message also to the courts and the teams?
Well, I think the point you make is correct. I don't think in the height of committing a crime, these offenders are checking the criminal code to see what the penalty for each individual thing they might do is. You know, the point you make is right. But what we can do is make sure that we have the laws that the courts, the police and the courts can then use to ensure that serious offenders receive custodial sentences, and then ensure that the custodial services, youth detention and custodial corrections, have the programs and funding and resources available to rehabilitate people while they are in those custodial detention centres.
How long it will take to actually get these reforms?
Well, it's a big package of reforms. Some of them can be done quickly and easily. Some of them will take longer, will require consultation, legislation, and the parliamentary process. So for each one, now that it is announced, I know that the bureaucracy, the public servants are working through the detail of those timelines.
The Council of Civil Liberties this morning has said it's a bit rich for the Premier in particular to criticise judiciary for not doing the job, given you already have the capacity to appeal sentences if you think they are too light, and seldom does the government appeal that. He said that the Premier should know better to criticise the judiciary, knowing full well that it doesn't have the capacity or doesn't respond. So why doesn't the government then appeal more sentences
Well, in response to those concerns, we have developed this new package which is designed to ensure that the judiciary does take into account how seriously the community sees these offences. This is the role of government in taking laws to the Parliament. The role of the judiciary is to implement those laws in consideration of the facts of individual cases, and where there is a view that the courts aren't adequately considering how seriously the community sees these offences, then it's the job of government then to propose new laws, and that's precisely what we've done.
In 2017, as she left the job, former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court made particular reference to politicians criticising the issue in her valedictory speech. Was that disregarded yesterday in the Premier made those remarks?
I think what we are saying very clearly with this new package is that the community has very serious concerns about these kinds of offences, and that we want to make sure that the police and the courts have the tools that they need to meet that community expectation. We receive advice from the Justice Department, from the Police Department, from other agencies about what laws they think are appropriate and useful in fighting crime and reducing crime. We take that advice and then we seek to ensure that they have those laws and those tools, and that's what this package does.
It's pretty extraordinary, and the Premier's comments have ruffled some feathers and certainly angered some people. So to confirm, you're completely standing by those comments from the Premier yesterday during civil.
Of course I am. Of course I am, and I think the comments that she made concur with the views that you hear in the community and the kind of views that I'm sure your viewers are expressing to you.
Just to touch on what's being done to sort of target this issue, what's being done to prevent these kids from even getting involved in the justice system in the first place?
So I didn't catch the middle bit of your question.
So what's being done to prevent kids from even getting involved in the first place?
Yeah, so I think it's important to emphasise that while many of the measures we announced yesterday go to tougher measures once crimes have occurred, they are on top of everything else that we have done in this area, including very significant increases of investment into prevention programs, into programs to stop recidivism, into programs to stop young people escalating in their offending. And you saw in Bob Atkinson's report that those initiatives had been by and large successful, that the vast bulk of offenders do not reoffend, in part because those programs are successful, but that there continues to be a small cohort who continue to reoffend, and that we need to provide to police and to the courts greater tools to address that kind of violent reoffending. So that's what yesterday's package was about. You shouldn't think that that's the only area that we're working on, that we will drop off all of the other reforms, because they are important. We will continue to support them, and the Bob Atkinson report said they were working. I can't say whether it would have been yesterday, but it would have been certainly made very early this year.
Nasty incident out of the fire. Been briefed on that.
I haven't, I'm sorry.
2-year-old child left dead at the hospital.
I'm not across the child, it sounds awful. Thank you. Yeah, no, we can find out.